Chapter 6 The Academy for Curious Squidges. Before school started on Monday, all the Squidges gathered around Hugo to look at his monster detector. "Don't they work?" asked Izzy. Izzy wore headgear for his overbite, so he spoke a little funny. Fortunately, Hugo almost always understood him. "Of course it works," Hugo said. "In fact, it's already found a monster." He told them about the green whistler, and when they didn't believe him, Gigi said it was all true, every word of it. Just then, Mrs. Nuckluck entered the classroom. They all rushed over to their desks and sat down. As usual, Mrs. Nuckluck was wearing her long white cloak made of goose feathers. "Good morning, class," she said. "We've got a busy day ahead of us, and later this morning I have a big surprise for you." The Squidges looked at each other excitedly. "Maybe it's a microscope," Gigi whispered to Hugo. Hugo hoped it was something more fun than a microscope, but he didn't say that to Gigi. "Does the surprise explode?" asked Malcolm. "No, it does not, and please raise your hand if you have something to say." Malcolm raised his hand. "Are you going to pull an egg out of your nose?" "Why on earth would I do that, Malcolm?" "Because you said there was going to be a big surprise, and that would be very surprising." Mrs. Nuckluck took a deep breath. Deep breaths seemed to help her when she spoke to Malcolm. "Take out your math books, everyone. We'll start right in on measurements." At that moment, a small human boy walked into the classroom. He had 38 freckles and he carried a paper bag. "Boone!" cried Hugo. You weren't supposed to shout in class, but Hugo was so shocked to see his friend that he couldn't help himself. "Is Boone the surprise, Mrs. Nuckluck?" asked Pip. "No," said Mrs. Nuckluck, "but I must admit I am surprised. What are you doing here, Boone?" "I've been thinking about it, and I finally decided," said Boone, smiling at them all. "I want to go to Squid School." Chapter 7 Snuds and Stonkers. Mrs. Nuckluck looked confused. "Don't you have your own school? A human school?" she asked. "I'm homeschooled, but my grandmother said that if a school opened up in the North Woods, I could go to it. And now that I know about the Academy for Curious Squidges, I've decided I want to go." Well, we've never had a human in our school. I'm not sure if it's..." Mrs. Nuckluck searched for the right word. "Please, Mrs. Nuckluck, please let Boone join our school," cried Hugo. Mrs. Nuckluck was so flustered that she forgot to remind Hugo to raise his hand. "I know all my state capitals," Boone said to her, "and I can spell pretty good, except I get my F's and PH's mixed up sometimes. Plus, I brought my own lunch." He held up his bag. Mrs. Nuckluck considered. "Well, I suppose you can spend the day here. After that, we'll just have to see. There's an empty seat next to Roderick. You can sit there for now." Roderick Rattlebag's hand shot up in the air. "Yes, Roderick?" "I refuse to sit next to a human," Roderick said in a puffed-up way. Boone had been walking happily over to Roderick's desk, but now he stopped short. His smile disappeared. "Boone is just as good at it as any squidge," Gigi snapped at Roderick. "And better than some," Hugo added, glaring at Roderick. "Our school is called the Academy for Curious Squidges," Roderick shot back at them in a spiteful way. "Not curious humans." "That's enough," Mrs. Nuckluck said. "Please sit down, Boone." Then she turned a stern face to Roderick. "You will share your math book with Boone." Roderick made a disgusted, huffing noise while Boone sat down next to him. The desk and the chair were made for Squidges, who are much larger than human children. Boone's head barely peeped over the desk, and his legs dangled off the ground. Roderick looked down at him with a sneer and shifted his chair as far away from Boone as possible. Mrs. Nuckluck led the class through a review of what they had been learning the past week in math. It was all easy stuff, like how many shucklings were in a snud. Boone raised his hand. "Yes, Boone?" said Mrs. Nuckluck. "What's a snud?" he asked. The whole class turned to stare at him, flabbergasted. Even the smallest Squidges knew what a snud was. "It's a unit of measurement," said Mrs. Nuckluck. "It's about half the size of a stonker." "A what?" asked Boone. Hugo frowned. What was Boone's grandmother teaching him if he didn't even know what a snud or a stonker were? Mrs. Nuckluck opened up her desk drawer and took out her measuring stick. It was a straight piece of maple branch with marks burned into it. "You see, Boone," she said patiently, placing one finger about halfway up the stick, "this much is a snud." Boone squinted at the stick for a moment. Then he smiled his big smile. "Oh, I get it. A snud is a foot." "Excuse me?" Mrs. Nuckluck looked confused. "A snud is a foot," Boone repeated. "A snud is a snud," Mrs. Nuckluck said firmly. "Which is also a foot," insisted Boone. Now you and I both know that Boone meant a foot in the measuring sort of way, such as there are 12 inches in a foot. But Sasquatches don't know about feet and yards and inches. That's why Mrs. Nuckluck's face suddenly grew very irritated. "A snud is not a foot," she told Boone sternly. "It's not a hand, nor an earlobe, nor a tongue either. And if you're going to be in this classroom, you'll have to behave and not act so silly." Boone turned bright red. He slumped in his seat while Roderick smirked at him. Things had not gotten off to a good start. Chapter 8 will be Extreme Creepy Cryptids.